The night she appeared at his gate, the wind was sharp enough to cut skin, and the snow had begun to fall sideways, as if the sky itself had lost patience with the world. Caleb Harlan had already turned off the barn lights and was halfway to the house when he saw Hera just a shape at first, hunched near the fence, one hand gripping the post like it was the only thing keeping her upright. He thought she might be a deer tangled in wire. Then she lifted her head, and he saw her face, pale and streaked with something darker than snow, and the way her knees buckled as soon as his boots crunched closer. She didn't ask for help. She didn't say anything at all. She just collapsed. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, the weight of her startlingly light in his arms, as if life itself had already begun loosening its hold. He smelled cold, blood, and something faintly floral that didn't belong out here. For one panicked second, a dozen thoughts crowded his mind: who she was, where she came from, what kind of trouble might follow her onto his land. Then he pushed them all aside. He lifted her, carried her toward the house, and kicked the door open with his heel. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them, and the woman stirred, a soft sound escaping her lips. Caleb laid her on the couch, grabbed blankets, and worked with the quiet efficiency of someone used to fixing what was broken without much ceremony. He cleaned the cut on her forehead, wrapped her scraped hands, and brewed coffee he doubted she'd be able to drink. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. She woke just before dawn, eyes snapping open like she'd been pulled from a nightmare. For a second she looked ready to run, scanning the room, her breath shallow and fast. Then her gaze landed on him, sitting in the chair across from her, and something in her face shifted. Not relief exactly, but exhaustion deep enough to crack whatever defenses she'd been holding up. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're on my ranch." "Name's Caleb." She swallowed. Her voice, when she spoke, was rough and barely more than a whisper. "Thank you." That was all she offered. No name, no explanation. And Caleb, true to his nature, didn't press. He brought her water. Later, soup. She ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days, careful but desperate. And when her hands shook too hard to manage the spoon, he steadied it without a word. By the second day, the storm had passed, leaving the land blanketed and silent. She moved slowly, as if every step required permission from her own body. She sat by the window for hours, watching the horizon, flinching at every distant sound. Caleb noticed everything and said nothing. He gave her the spare room and one of his late wife's sweaters, thick and soft, and tried not to think about how naturally it seemed to fit her. At night, he lay awake listening for movement, half expecting her to disappear as suddenly as she'd arrived. But each morning, she was still there, helping quietly where she could, washing dishes, folding laundry with careful precision. On the fourth day, she finally told him her name was Anna. It came out hesitant, like she wasn't entirely sure she still owned it. Caleb nodded and accepted it without comment, though something in her eyes told him it might not be the whole truth. Still, it was more than he'd asked for. Days turned into a rhythm. Anna grew stronger, color slowly returning to her cheeks. She smiled sometimes, a small, cautious smiles that made Caleb's chest ache in ways he hadn't felt in years. They talked about harmless things: the weather, the land, his cattle. She listened intently when he spoke, like every word mattered, and that alone made him want to tell her more. He learned she had a gentle laugh that surprised her as much as it surprised him. He learned she woke from bad dreams and sat on the edge of the bed until the dark loosened its grip. He learned she carried sorrow like an old injury, or something that flared unexpectedly and never fully healed. What he didn't learn was where she'd come from, or what she was running from. And though curiosity gnawed at him, he didn't push. People showed up broken sometimes. His ranch had a way of giving them room to breathe. It was nearly 2 weeks in when everything changed. They were in the barn, the afternoon light slanting through the open doors, dust motes floating like tiny planets. Anna had insisted on helping despite his protests, brushing down one of the horses with a focus that suggested the task meant more to her than just being useful. Caleb leaned against the stall, watching her, feeling something dangerously close to contentment. Without warning, Her hand froze mid-stroke. Her breath caught. The brush slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt with a soft thud. "Anna?" he said, stepping closer. She turned to him slowly, eyes wide and glassy, like she was seeing something that wasn't there. Her lips trembled. "He's here," she whispered. Caleb frowned. "Who's here?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted back to his face, and when she spoke again, the name fell between them like a live wire. "Daniel." The world tilted. Caleb took a step back, the sound of his own heartbeat roaring in his ears. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, not since the funeral, not since the betrayal that had split his life clean in two. "Why did you say that?" he asked, his voice too tight. Anna's face drained of color. She stared at him, confusion bleeding into fear. "A broken bar, you know him?" "Know him." The understatement nearly made him laugh. Daniel Harlan had been his younger brother, his best friend, the man who'd left town 10 years ago under a cloud of whispered accusations and never returned. The man whose mistakes had cost lives. The man Caleb had buried in his heart long before the body was laid in the ground. Caleb's jaw clenched. "How do you know that name?" Anna's knees buckled, and this time he didn't catch her fast enough to keep them both from sinking to the floor. She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. "I didn't know," she said, the words muffled. "I swear I didn't know this was your ranch. I didn't even know where I was when I collapsed." If you had what?" Caleb snapped, anger flaring hot and sudden, fueled by grief he thought he'd mastered. "You wouldn't have come?" She looked up at him then, eyes flooded with tears. "I wouldn't have put you through this." Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Caleb forced himself to breathe. He ran a hand through his hair and turned away, pacing the length of the barn. Every memory he'd buried clawed its way back to the surface. Daniel's smile, his recklessness, the night everything went wrong. "Why are you here?" Caleb finally asked. "What does my brother have to do with you?" Anna wiped her cheeks with shaking fingers. "He saved my life." The words stopped him cold. She told him everything then, her story spilling out in fragments at first, then in a rush she couldn't contain. Years ago, when she was barely out of college, she'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A late-night drive. A stretch of road known for trouble. Men who saw an opportunity. Daniel had been there. Passing through town, already running from his own demons. He'd stepped in without hesitation, pulled her out of danger, taken the beating meant for her. He'd gotten her to safety, insisted she go to the hospital, and disappeared before she could even properly thank him. "He gave me his jacket," she said softly. "It had his name stitched inside. That's how I knew who he was." Caleb's chest tightened painfully. "I tried to find him," Anna continued. "I wanted to tell him he mattered, that what he did changed everything for me. I only found out years later, a broken bar, about the fire, about what people said happened." The fire. Caleb closed his eyes. The night the old mill burned down, taking 2 workers with it. The night Daniel was blamed for negligence, for being drunk, for not doing enough. The night he left town and never came back. The night his body was pulled from the river weeks later, an apparent accident that answered nothing and left everything raw. "I don't believe he was a bad man," Anna said, her voice fierce despite the tears. "I know what people said, but I know what he did for me. He was brave. He was kind." Caleb sank onto a bale of hay, the fight draining out of him. For years, he'd carried a complicated grief, a love tangled with resentment, pride mixed with shame. He'd never known how to reconcile the brother he adored with the mistakes that haunted their family name. "You shouldn't have to carry this," Anna said quietly. "I'm sorry if my being here opened wounds." He looked at her then, really looked at the woman who'd walked into his life battered and silent, who'd accepted his kindness without taking advantage, who spoke his brother's name with reverence instead of judgment. "He was my brother," Caleb said, his voice breaking. I loved him. I just a broken bar. I didn't know how to forgive him. Anna nodded, understanding etched into her features. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about excusing what went wrong. Sometimes it's about remembering what went right. The days that followed were different. He didn't ask her to leave. He didn't shut her out. Instead, they talked for the first time about Daniel, about loss, about the strange ways kindness echoed long after the moment passed. Caleb told her things he'd never said out loud, about the guilt of not reaching out sooner, about the anger that had been easier to hold than the pain. Anna listened, offering no platitudes, only presence. Slowly, something in him softened. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in quiet colors, Anna stood beside him on the porch. The land stretched out before them, endless and steady. I think, she said hesitantly, that maybe I didn't end up here by accident. Caleb glanced at her. What do you mean? I was running, she admitted. From fear, from the past. But here broken bar I found answers I didn't know I was looking for. He considered that, the weight of it settling comfortably between them. You're welcome to stay, he said, as long as you need. Her smile then was full and unguarded, and it felt like something healing passed between them, something earned. Spring came slowly, thawing the last of winter's hold. Anna took on more around the ranch, her confidence growing with each day. Laughter returned to the house, real and frequent. And in the quiet moments, when their hands brushed or their eyes lingered a second too long, they both felt it, the undeniable pull of two souls stitched together by shared loss and unexpected grace. One night, as they sat by the fire, Anna rested her head on his shoulder. Caleb didn't move, afraid to break the spell. He thought of Daniel then, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Kindness had brought Anna to his door. Truth had tested them both. And love, quiet, steady, and hard-won, had found a way to grow in the aftermath. Sometimes, Caleb realized, humanity wasn't about grand gestures or perfect choices. Sometimes it was about opening a door without questions, and having the courage to listen when the answers finally came.